Hello and welcome. This is Zero MT. I am hoping to show you a cheap, low-tech, mostly open source way of making your own music in a non-traditional manner. I'm going to use a number of different tools, but the one that I use the most is called Niall's Pedalboard by Niall Moody. So we're going to search for that. I think we'll find it pretty quick. There we go, niallmoody.com. Pedalboard is a very general interface, and it's inviting to me because it's so sparse. I'm going to try to talk you through something like what you see here. We probably won't be doing a file player, and we probably won't be using the audio and MIDI inputs. Instead, we're going to be producing the sounds directly from our computer using VSTi, an instrument, and we will look at these filters and similar things soon after. Pedalboard is normally, if you just look for Pedalboard, especially if you can type, you will probably find, okay, this is a pedalboard for, operating a church organ with your feet, which is really cool. But the most common types of pedalboards are these that are based, they're created for a guitar. And they're actually talking about the board, this piece of wood underneath the pedals. Neil's piece of software here, which he created all by himself as far as I know, and he has open sourced it, so it doesn't require registration. It doesn't really even require installation. It's a very kind gift, and yes, it doesn't always work quite how you would expect because it hasn't been actively developed for a long time, and of course when that happens you can complain to the manager, but the beauty of this software is it does what it's supposed to do, and it there was a programmer and musician who built it, so honestly I am really grateful, and I hope that software like this can still exist in the world of Cantabile and Cakewalk and all these. You must be registered, you must be online, you must pay your yearly dues, pieces of bloatware that are out now. All right, that was harsh, but yeah, that's how I feel. Okay, let's not delay. Let's get in. We're going to download the Windows version. This is a new Windows 10 computer that I have, and I am trying to set it up to be my new composition computer. And Pedalboard is one of my main tools, so we're going to start with that. I did, full disclosure, try this earlier, and I was not happy with the recording. I'm going to try to do it quicker this time, and we will see errors. You can make fun of me when those happen. I think that's great. All right, so the first thing I want to do is just take a look at this zip file. That's not what I want to do. I think I'm going to just extract this onto the desktop. We're definitely not going to leave it there. That's an ugly place for your stuff to pile up. Okay, what I've done here is I have downloaded not just Pedalboard, but also its source code, which is really cool. It's really cool for him to give us this. And also, if you feel like you need to complain, well, you can learn this code. I think it's C++. I think it uses juice libraries. I am a programmer, but I don't like to program on the weekends. I like to make music or do other creative things. And so I'm not going to delve into that if I can help it. We get two versions of Pedalboard, one that's just pedalboard2.exe and one that's pedalboard2 -64bit.exe. This distinction is really important. I'll try to talk about it a little bit. But what I want to do with this stuff is I'm actually going to take the whole contents of, I'm going to delete this zip. Actually, before I do, let's look at the properties. 5 megabytes includes the whole application and all of its source code. Just incredible. Now, let me take you through this, quote, complicated, unquote, installation procedure. I want to put this on my D drive. And I like prog32, prog64 instead of programming files x86 and programming files or program files. All that's important is whatever pattern you adopt, you stick to it. The 32-bit builds need to go in the 32-bit folder. The 64-bit builds are too big. 64-bit stuff will not work in a 32-bit context, so they need to be separated. There are ways to get 32-bit items to run in 64 bits. There are no ways to get 64-bit assemblies to run in 32 bits. You can't park a bus in a single car garage. Okay, I'm going to open up my progs 32 here, which might be program files x86 on your machine. I'm going to look at what's in this box here, and I am just going to copy this Pedalboard 2 subdirectory over here. Paste. And you know what? I'm going to do the same thing over here in my 64. And I just said we can't mix these. Why am I mixing them? I'm going to correct that right now. So I'm going to go into the 64 and I'm going to delete, within my 64-bit directory, I'm going to delete the 32-bit assembly. And then I'm going to go into the 32-bit and I'm going to delete the 64-bit assembly. I didn't have to do that. I don't need 2 copies of the docs. I don't need 2 copies of the source code. This is, but we're talking about a few megabytes, and this is just going to make it easier for me to track this stuff down in the future. That's really it for installing it, but then how do we use it? All right, before I go any further, I'm going to delete this thing from my desktop, try to keep it clean. Now I'm going to drag pedalboard2.exe from the 32-bit folder. Everything I show you, I said, is going to be low tech. We're going to do most of this in 32 bits. Scaling up to 64 bits and other programs is not very hard at all, and hopefully I'll show you how to do that in future videos. Here comes Pedalboard2.exe. Create shortcuts here. All right, this is going to be how we launch it. Probably going to be how we launch it from now on. Okay, I guess the last thing that, well, probably the first thing I should have done before you launch any XE is scan this stuff. Now, I have never, ever found anything wrong with anything Niall has built. It's just good practice always to scan everything you download. I hope to show you good places to get these assemblies that we're going to use, and I hope those places stay good, that they're not bought by evil entities. But always scan. Just always protect yourself. Okay, let's run Pedalboard. Let's allow access. This is fine. Now, this is our workspace here. It's a patch, and I don't use the patch interface very much. It's got a tempo that defaults to 120 beats a minute. That's your embryonic heartbeat pretty much for a human. It's the most common dance tempo. We've got some inputs, audio input, MIDI input, and OSC input. I don't know a lot about OSC, so I'm not going to speak to it in much detail. MIDI input will be how Pedalboard, this application, shakes hands with external MIDI hardware like a keyboard. We'll get to that, but not in this video. Audio input, similar. How it shakes hands with external audio input like a microphone. Audio input, microphone, is a series of floating point numbers, a series of decimals that has to do really with how hard and in which direction does the speaker driver move the speaker. So when you see a waveform, which we probably will see before the video's over, that's telling you how the speaker shakes. So it's even though it is digital, there are a finite number of values in there. It is very close to an analog sound when you're using 32-bit or 64-bit or anything 32-bit or greater, because it ends up being translated into a very continuous movement. MIDI input's totally different. This does not make a sound. It is instructions, only instructions. And hopefully we'll be able to show you those too. Audio output is once whatever happens, whatever magic happens in here comes out, this is where it goes in the system. So if I go to options, audio settings, this gives me more details. The output is to currently my USB audio, which is the headset on my head. The audio device type, I'm using the built-in Windows audio, which is okay. It's definitely good enough for this, and we'll talk about why we might want to use ASIO or WSAPI sometime in the future. The microphone is, again, this boom mic on my headset, and you can see the levels dancing around as I talk. Output channels. We need to have active output channels. This is the left and the right. By convention, left always comes first. The sample rate is quite high. That's much higher than your usual CD sample rate, so that's great. Audio buffer size is 10 milliseconds, which is 480 of those numbers that move the speaker. We could mess this around a lot. It has to be more than nothing. And if we were to lower it all the way down to the minimum here, which is I think 144, we would notice lots of glitchy nastiness, and not the cool kind of glitchy nastiness that we want in, IDM or EDM. This is going to be essentially like skips in your signal. And if we were to increase it way up here, the signal gets buttery smooth, but our inputs come, 40 milliseconds, that's 4% of a second after our outputs. So if I'm trying to play in time, if I'm playing an external instrument using a microphone, and I'm trying to play in time with this signal, that's going to be impossible, or it's going to be really annoying. That's called latency. For me, the sweet spot is somewhere around in here, the 5 milliseconds, but we're going to stick with the defaults for this because we're not using external inputs yet. That's a pretty good intro to Pedalboard. Let's next double click. I swear we're going to make some sounds soon, but Pedalboard is a harness, and you need to learn how to fit the harness before you get on the horse. Double click. What we see here is some, we're going to see some stuff that I haven't yet removed because, like I said, I tried this earlier and it blew up in my face. So I'm going to try it again. Instead of going directly into that, let's click on plugin list, and we'll have a list. This is, if you watched quickly, the same list that we saw. Now I'm going to select options, remove any plugins whose files no longer exist. And look, some of those disappeared. We're going to put them back during this video, so don't sweat. But what you see here is important, and you should, honestly, I wish I had just written it down on a piece of paper or something. These are great tools that come packed in to Pedalboard. VU meter, well, let's go through them. I'm going to double click. Audio recorder is, you saw in the screenshot earlier, it's just a nice, simple way to record the audio that you would potentially send out to your speakers. That is awesome. I use it all the time. File player, sort of the opposite. It picks up a WAV file. It might also work on other formats like MP3, but it picks up a WAV file and it plays it through when you click play. Very useful. Looper is, again, the same thing as file player, but it gives you the option, I think, to repeat it. So as soon as it quits, it will play it again. That can be a lot more useful than a single shot file play, depending on how you're using it. Level is a volume knob. That's all that is. But it's super useful. It's great to have it right here in front of you. Metronome, pretty self-explanatory. We're not going to use that here, but it's always there if you need it. If you need a tick tick to play against, the metronome can do it. Output toggle looks weird. Looks sort of like, to me, a little bit like the Aphex Twin symbol. But what this does is it lets you route a single channel of output either to this up or this down. And that can be really useful in a lot of contexts in the future. We're not going to use it that much in this video. VU meter, useful all the time. It shows you the levels. It's red at the top when the noise gets too loud. You can see you're in danger of clipping. We'll talk more about all that. But hopefully this is making you feel at least a little bit at home with the interface. These things are called plugins, and these are the built-in plugins, and that's why they're in the plugin list. None of them make noise. I mean, arguably the file player could if we had a file that was full of noise, but none of them make noise. So why did we even do this? Well, glad you asked. I'm going to close Pedalboard for now. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to save this as demo 1. It could be anything. Pedalboard uses the .pdl extension. So save that. And it saves to my documents folder, which is actually okay. Now, let's take a quick aside. If you're like me, you need to know what's happening under the hood. Let's take a look inside that PDL file. It's really just a text file. This one was basically blank, so it's got very little in it. And we're going to, it's listing the plugins here, that sort of thing. We are going to create much more sophisticated files, not in a text editor like Notepad++, which is awesome, which actually does work for this, but that's the very hard way to do it. We're going to create them in Pedalboard. But that's what you're saving, and that's why it's okay to throw them pretty much wherever you want, a reliable place like your documents folder, even if that's on your C drive. These project files don't get very big, these PDL files. Next thing, if you, like me, have a new computer, one of the first things, a new Windows computer, one of the first things you want to do is pick almost any folder, click View, Options, then click View again, then go down here into Advanced Settings, and you want to find Hide Extensions for Known File Types. So these are the dot something something at the end of each file, and you want to untick that. You do not want that ticked. Yes, it means all your exes will now have a .exe behind them, but it makes working with files much less confusing, and a lot of the things I say aren't going to make any sense unless you can see the file extension. If you absolutely hate it, you could just untick it later, but that is a very good way to get a better handle on what's going on in your system. All right, that said, Pedalboard plays VSTs. What are VSTs? VSTs are, I think it stands for Virtual Studio Instrument. It's it's a format invented by Steinberg, actually, I think over 20 years ago, late 1990s. And it is a way for a programmer to build something like a Lego block that you can then take and snap into your existing software. VST in Pedalboard will look almost identical to that same VST in LMMS or in Waveform or in Reaper or in any of the Carla, any of the DAWs that we might work with. A DAW is a digital audio workstation. It's just a lot easier to say DAW. Pedalboard barely qualifies as a DAW, but I hope as we work on it, you'll see that it is a lot more than it first appears. To make noise, we're going to want a free VST, and I think this is called Plugins for Free. Yep, here we go, Plugins for Free. This is my favorite place to get VSTs. I'll show you some other places. I've never got a virus off this site, but always check. And the star ratings they're reasonably okay. Unfortunately, some of the very best things here have been here for a while, and so they are not 5-star when they really should be. Each of these comes in some assembly. You see Win32. These are 32-bit Windows assemblies, and you'll see there's a lot more of those in these free sections than other formats. Sometimes the 64-bit format exists. Sometimes a build for OS X, the Mac build, exists. We're going to concentrate for now on the 32-bit, and we'll talk about in the future why that is. The main thing is that in the heyday of VST manufacture, which is the early 2000s, lots and lots of fantastic stuff was put out in the 32-bit format. When the 64-bit format came along, a lot of this was migrated exactly as it should be. A lot of companies kept both builds, which is great. But also a lot of people just abandoned the 32. And the the upsurge in the early 2000s of awesome free tools being given out to musicians, it died way back. And now most of the apps you deal with are, we're going to need some sort of subscription, and you'll need to be online while you use it. Maybe you'll need a hardware dongle. To me, that's it's very destructive to any sort of composition process. The first thing we're going to look for is Jazz Baby. Jazz Baby is a VST-I, which means it's an instrument in the VST format. There are tons of VST-Is, and a lot of times people will just say VST, meaning either a VST effect or a VST instrument. Jazz Baby is a VST-I. This will probably be a little bit loud when I play it. This is their demo. Jazz Baby is about as plain as you can get for VST-I, and I love it. I use it all the time. Now, I've just downloaded that, but I want to download something else while I'm out here. The next one is from a developer I really respect, Toby Bear. Let's see if we can find him. Nope. There we go. So the interface is not necessarily the smoothest. Remember, these are people giving you stuff for free. They really want you to succeed. And yeah, there are rough edges everywhere, but we're really lucky to have what we have. I need to download this Chordator. I'm going to open that in a new tab. And I need to download another one called Quick Keys. I have to go a few pages in to find it. Look at all this cool stuff that Toby Bear has given us. I've tried most of these, and I would say I understand maybe like 2/3 of them. All right, we're going to open Quick Keys in a new window. We may come back and try these step sequencers. This is a synth. That's an instrument. We'll get back to these. There are tons of things on this site, and Toby's are some of the best and simplest in my opinion. I hate to browse away, but let's try to get this sound made. Now, Chordator, I will explain that soon. We're going to come back to that. For those with some music theory knowledge, these are semitone adjustments of a single input signal. And just make sure they came down. We'll close this. Quick Keys. Here we go. Same drill. All these are Win32-bit VSTs. Now, I'm going to just close Firefox for now. Well, I'll just leave that up where it is. Let's take a look at our downloads. Quick Keys, Chordator, and Jazz Baby. That's all we're going to try to understand here. And I think if I shift-click, I can select them all and scan them. They will be virus-free. They always are, but always check. Now, yes, I know Firefox and modern browsers have built-in calls, etc. Just always check. Don't get caught unawares. Okay. The next step we want to do is to install these somewhere where Pedalboard can find them. This is a really important step. I'm going to hit Windows key E. That's going to open an Explorer window. And then I'm going to go over here to my D drive. This is where I want to put these in my D drive. You should probably put them in some place that you have plenty of expansion room. And I'm going to start by creating at least 2 folders. This one is going to be called VST, right in the root of my D drive. I know that's ugly. VST _2 _32. This is going to represent most of what we do. That's a 32-bit folder for VST2s. But, we need to be symmetrical, so we're going to say VST to 64. And this is because we are going to encounter 64-bit VSTs on our journey, and this is where we're going to want them to go. Now, you're going to see pretty soon that a VST has a file extension of .dll. And that is because it's a dynamic link library. And will make a little more sense when we get a little deeper. There is another kind of VST that is much more modern. In fact, it's the only one that new companies can really make, and that's a VST 3. And because it's much more modern, hardly anyone makes them in 32-bit. So if you were to create a folder for that, you would want a VST 364. These are the folders I normally use, and by far, for simple stuff, VST232 gets the most use. But having them here in the root of a drive where they're really easy to find, it's going to pay off, because you're going to browse to these potentially hundreds of times, honestly, maybe thousands of times. And one that was working for me the last time I tried to do this was just VST new. This is stuff I don't know about. It's just a place to put my VSTs. So maybe if I'm going to follow my pattern, I'm going to cut all these out of downloads and paste them into VST new. All right, that's step 1. Now, step 2, I want to get quick keys. Now this is going to, that's fine. We're going to open it that way. Quick keys is a zip file. It has inside it a manual. I didn't read this last time and I got in trouble for it. I'm also not going to read it this time, and we will probably get in trouble for that. It's got 2 .reg files. These are not very common in a distribution, but they're perfectly fair game. You should always be careful about reg files, but these are safe, and I'll explain why in a moment. And this is the all-important, this is the VST. It's a quickeys.dll. So that's our VST. Now, as a general rule, when you're deploying these things, you put them into the bit width they belong. So this is 32 bits wide. It's a .dll, so that means it's a VST2. That means this is where it goes. Everything that is named after that VST, so quick keys and the reg and everything, all of that stuff can go over there. If the stuff is named ambiguously, you may want to create a subdirectory. We'll probably do that soon, when we need to. This is all I want to do with quick keys at this moment. I'm going to go back to VST new and look at the Jazz Baby. Jazz Baby is simpler still. All it is a DLL. Drag it over there. All right. So there we go. That looks pretty good. We didn't touch the chordator, and there's a reason for that. I had some heartache with it last time. Let's see how this goes. So our next step is to launch Pedalboard. We don't need this window open, but it's kind of nice to have it to refer to as we work. I'm going to say Options, Plugin List, and then click Options again. I'm going to remove any plugins whose files no longer exist. We did this last time. It doesn't hurt to do it, and occasionally, just like you saw last time, you'll have something that you were using before that you don't want listed anymore. For instance, something you tried and didn't like and deleted. Now, we're going to scan for new or uploaded VST plugins. This is a step many DAWs do, and Pedalboard honestly does it really well, even though it's a little bit brittle. It can possibly break. Now, normally this would default to somewhere in your C program files, VST plugins directory, which probably doesn't even exist yet. You want to, if it does that, you want to select this, and I think we just click minus and it goes away. Then we want to do plus, and we want to add the directory that we're talking about. Unfortunately, we use this old school directory browser. Lots of times you'll be doing that, so that's another reason to just have this directory very simply handy in 1 or 2 layers deep where you can find it. VST232. Okay. Now click scan. Now that scan happened so fast you didn't get to see it. But what you will notice is Quick Keys and Jazz Baby have appeared in our list and pushed everything else down. And this is another reason why I said you should pay attention to these guys that show up here as internal effects, because they're going to get lost in the mix really soon. And they're all super useful. It took me, if you forget that you have an audio recorder, if you forget that you have a looper or VU meter, you may have some anxiety trying to find those things unnecessarily because they're right here. The audio recorder is fantastic, which I think I mentioned. Jazz Baby, Quick Keys, here they are. So I'm going to double click in this empty area again, and we will see the new list. It now includes Jazz Baby and Quick Keys. So we're going to start by adding Quick Keys. All right, I jumped the gun there. Quick Keys has MIDI settings. We're not going to use those here. They're perfectly fair game. There are 16 MIDI channels that you can route different ways. I'm almost always just going to accept the defaults here because I am not subtle. But if you want to get subtle, if you want to make more efficient use of single connections, by all means, mess with your MIDI channel settings. It has a bypass, which I'm not sure if it actually works. I don't use that. But it's got an editor, E. And what E does is it launches something that isn't Pedalboard. It launches the Quick Keys DLL. And the Quick Keys DLL has a graphic user interface that is a keyboard that we can actually play with our mouse. Now, no sound is coming out. There's lots of reasons for that. But something is coming out from here, and I don't know if we should study that right now or not. Let's do it. All right, plugins for free. We're going to find another one. It's called Midi Monitor. Let's see how fast we can do this. Midi Monitor. This is it. Looks super boring. Perfect. All right, we want to go there. We want to download. We'll just do the 32-bit for now. Could do the 64 and save it. Don't need it right now. I'm going to go into my downloads directory. And there's Midi Monitor. I guess I'll follow the same pattern, cut it. I already know what's inside, but I'm going to paste it over here in my new VSTs. I already know it's safe, but I'm going to scan it anyway. That's just good hygiene. All right, Midi Monitor DLL. That's the only thing in there. Great. Goodbye. And see, I closed the wrong window. So it's, again, it's really nice to have this where you can get to it quickly. Paste. Midi Monitor is in there now. Midi Monitor is in my VST2 32 directory. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say, oh, I'll just click here. Well, it's not listed. Why isn't it? Because Pedalboard only knows what it found when it last scanned. So we're going to go to plugin list again, options. You can remove if you want to, and then scan. Look, the newest one pops to the top, Midi Monitor. Great. All right, that wasn't too big of an aside. Now we're going to add Midi Monitor here. I'm going to look at the interface for that, and boy, is it boring. It looks like Notepad. There are a few controls here that you almost need magnifying glass to see, but even in its default configuration, it's pretty good. Now, I am going to draw a line. I'm going to drag a cable out of this orange sort of semicircle here on the right side of the Quick Keys interface box. This orange cable represents information, represents data, represents MIDI data that I told you about earlier, which are numbers that correspond to notes and the velocity, which is to say the volume of those notes, and some other aspects of the notes, the duration, that sort of thing. I am going to hook it into the Midi Monitor. Now you might think, well, I'll just hook the Midi Monitor into Quick Keys. This is just a quirk of Pedalboard. You can't do that. You only drag from left to right. And you have to hook that up directly. And every time you make a hookup, you get that MIDI interface that I told you about. You can do all sorts of good stuff here with the different MIDI channels. We're just going to accept the defaults and close it. Now we have two connected items here. Nothing from outside is coming in, and nothing that we see here is going out. So we're still just living inside Pedalboard. But we have two VSTs, Quick Keys and Midi Monitor in there. Now what happens if I click the button on Quick Keys again? Any key, in fact. We'll just do this C. I get a note on and a note off message. So this is what Quick Keys is sending out. I'm going to clear that, and we'll just do one more. These are actually the hexadecimal representation of the bits that are sent, if you're interested. But what it means is on channel 2, there was a note on the velocity of 127. That's the maximum velocity. And then there was a note off with a zero velocity. It's important to know that that's going on under the hood. You don't need to speak hexadecimal. You don't even need to view this GUI in most cases, but it's really handy to know that you're that close to the metal. These things are really happening, and you can see, if you need to, you can read the bits. Okay, clear that, and I'm going to, I'll leave it hooked up. Yeah, I'll leave it hooked up. I'll put Midi Monitor sort of out of the way here. Midi Monitor only shows us the instructions is being sent. There is no audio component at all, in or out. That's why we want Jazz Baby. Let's put Jazz Baby in here. Now we're going to connect quick keys to Jazz Baby the very same way. The same things will happen. And now the one input goes two different places. And if I hit this key, I do get output in the Midi Monitor, but I also am communicating with Jazz Baby. Jazz Baby, if we open up its editor, its interface, is super plain. Like, there is nothing going on here. There are no knobs or buttons or anything. There's no presets. Jazz Baby is a one-trick pony, but it is all piano all the time. It's great. I love it. So there's nothing on this interface that tells us instructions are being received. And that's okay. If we need to snoop what's happening, we just put Midi Monitor in there and we connect them both to the same place. So we know that Jazz Baby is seeing this. We need proof. All right, let's prove it. Let's draw blue output cables. The one on top, by convention, is always the left. The first one, the one on top, is always the left. The second one is the right. Let's draw these output cables from Jazz Baby to our audio output. There. Now, when I hit a key over here, it may be kind of loud. I'm working on getting the balance right here. When I hit a key over here, Jazz Baby should interpret these instructions that it's getting. You know, turn the note on, then turn the note off. Sound it at this velocity, that sort of thing. You should interpret those as a piano-like sound. This is a synthesizer. It's not a sample of a piano or anything, but it's still pretty nice. So we're just going to hit a few keys and see if anything comes out. Apologies if it's too loud. There we go. Playing a keyboard in tiny keys with your mouse is no fun at all, but that's okay. We're making music. We're making sounds. There are more steps that I want to do. I'm going to call this video here and then create another one, I think. We are making sounds. We can go different octaves. One reason to use a piano is it's got a lot of octaves, almost all the octaves in the human hearing range. We can alter the velocity. We can change the MIDI channels that are being broadcast, etc. Midi Monitor is telling us what's going on. If we get tired of seeing that, we just select this and tap the delete button. Now it's living out there if we need it, but the signal is no longer going there. The signal is still going to Jazz Baby, so we are still hearing sounds. All right, now we're going to save this again as demo 1. Yep, replace it. Okay, we're making sounds for free with some old, yes, and lo-fi, well, at least low-tech pieces of equipment. But actually, it's pretty good sounds, and the fidelity, the actual fi, can be pretty high if we do things right. We're going to break there. Please let me know if you like this, and I will try to do some more. Thanks.